Welcome to Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Vanessa Rose. Thank you so much for tuning in to join us for another great edition today. Today, we are so excited to be joined for the first time by a wonderful organization, Streetlight USA, and we have the president and CEO with us, Leah Benson. Thank you so much for joining us today, Leah.
Thank you, Vanessa, very much for having us on your show.
Such a pleasure to have you. Just was recently acquainted with your organization, have been aware of you in the past, and some of you may be aware of Streetlight USA, but you minister and deal with a very specific crisis, really, that's happening in our nation, in our world. A very sad crisis, a very sad thing that is happening to so many young women, which is sex trafficking. And if you wouldn't mind speaking briefly about yourself and how you got involved and really what it is you're doing at Streetlight USA.
Great. So Streetlight USA was started from the hearts of our leaders, specifically our church leaders. What they found was that there was many children that were being diagnosed in a fashion where they were considered at risk, and so they were just treated as at-risk children, but in reality there was more to it than that. And so that the more they dug into it, also what they found was there was not services that were available for these children. Specifically at the very beginning was a safe haven. And so many of the churches came together and decided that a facility was needed. They worked with our leadership in government as well as law enforcement, and Streetlight was born.
Wow. And so how long have you been with Streetlight USA?
I've been with Streetlight for about 6 years now.
Wonderful. And it's based out of Arizona, but it reaches throughout the entire nation, correct?
It is. So Streetlight was created to deal with the domestic issues. This is known as something that happens in third world countries, but what people don't realize is that it's happening in our backyards.
No, it absolutely is. I know that recently, whenever we had the Super Bowl here in our community, there was finally a very large push of awareness saying how much of an issue it was going to be with so many people coming in and so much tourism coming in and so many issues. And so I think for the first time, a lot of people in our community here in Arizona became aware of how big of an issue it really is right here in our own community.
It is. It's an issue, and it's an issue that is not just with homeless children or poverty. It's across the board. These kids are being taken from schools all over, from malls all over. So it's not a specific population that's been targeted for this.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us, Leah. We are going to be specifically speaking about that in the second half of the program, but here, this first segment, we are going to be speaking about our children's internet community. This is something that is really a new struggle for parenting. In past generations, you haven't had this essentially this stranger in your home that unfortunately the internet has brought forth. And whenever we think of the internet, there's a lot of good things that come from it, and we have a lot of information and access to a lot of things. But whenever it comes to children, they are exposed to things that in previous generations and any other point in life, they have not been exposed to. So how do you define a child's internet community, and what does that really mean?
You know, I was just at a school the other day, and we were talking about internet and how it's now impacted the new generation. And I remember growing up, and I could go 2 blocks down the street and think that I wasn't going to get away with something, right? And my mom, as soon as I walked in the door, it would be, so what were you doing over there at this location?
Yes.
And it was like, oh gosh, I'm caught, right? Well, kids nowadays, it's not the neighbor that is their community. It is the internet. So as a parent, we have to realize that it's not the same, and our solutions can't be the same. And so it's understanding, what does our child's internet community look like, because that's where they live now. It's on Snapchat, it's on Facebook, it's on Twitter, and all these are the things that parents may not be aware of.
And you mentioned Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, all these things. I think the biggest issue that a lot of people, especially if parents, although a lot of adults now are starting to get involved in it as well, and they're starting to be more aware of what's going on, they may not realize the extent to which their children are involved in social media and how many people are capable of reaching them. What in your experience, do you feel is kind of an appropriate age and time whenever children should first of all be allowed to have this, and when should they really be allowed to have just kind of free reign, or should there always remain that sense of accountability there while they're still minors?
There should always be accountability, because you don't know who is going to touch your child, right? Who is going to be talking to them? Perpetrators and predators, it's not a one-time thing. They could befriend your child one day and it increases to that. That's some of the things that we see at Streetlight. And so it's really important. As far as an appropriate age, there are a lot of good things on the internet, right? There's lots of educational things, and I see kids as early as 3 years old that have iPads. And there's nothing wrong with that, but what's important is that we as parents have to realize that we have to monitor and we have to watch what is happening online. Recently, I've heard of games where there are images that pop in through that make a kid curious, and then once they follow that link, it tracks them. And so you just really don't know anymore.
No, you don't. And there's so much information and so much availability. So it's important then to encourage parents to not necessarily be the friend, but to be the parent, because you truly are your child's advocate while they are a minor, and especially whenever they're as young as 3 and 4 and 5. I mean, I see some kids that are better with technology than a lot of adults, and they're able to just pick it up and start doing things. So as parents, is it important to maybe even have a social media account? That way you can watch your kids, that way you can be on there and you can see what's happening. And is it important to have that proactive measure where some kids might think you're being uncool or you're being unfair, but that's really important because that could be what ends up saving them from a major trauma or ending up at an organization like yours because something took them the wrong way, or somebody misled them without their parents knowing.
So intrusion, yes, it's very important, and it's not intrusion. It's about keeping your child safe. I just spoke with a member of Homeland Security at an event, and they have devices where parents can track what's going on. It's really important, and yes, but you know, what child thinks their parent is doing the right thing for them until they have their own family, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, my boys always thought I was a horrible mom and I didn't understand them, right?
Yes.
And now my oldest one is constantly thanking me for all the things that he thought then were bad, but it's helped him along. So there's no difference with the internet community. It's the same thing. It's just they're not tangible. You can't see them. These are silent individuals that are on the internet that we must watch for.
And so what are 3 simple things that people can do to keep their children safe on the internet?
Set guidelines, monitor what it is that they're doing, and have passwords.
Ah, yes. That's probably one that makes a lot of kids really upset, but you have to safeguard things. And there's so many resources available now. Are there not, where you can have safeguards so they can't go to certain sites, so they can't access certain things? There's a lot of resources available to parents now.
There are, but again, if you have teens, you don't want to alienate them.
Yes.
And it's about creating that relationship with them.
Yes.
Or a mentor that can be on the outside that maybe they trust and you trust, who can be that voice for them. So it's really important to build that relationship so that it isn't not a negative, you can't do this, but it's more helping them to understand the process of why you're doing it.
Yes. And in that, how important is the parenting aspect of that, of teaching your children the difference between right and wrong? Because if you train up a child in the way they should go, when they're old, they won't depart from it. And even as they're still young, if you build that sense of consciousness and right and wrong inside of them, hopefully, I am not a parent myself yet, but having a mom and father who's very actively involved and being around people who are that way, I think it would give children, I know from my own personal experience, there was times where I was put in situations, whether it be in person or online, where something inside me triggered and I was like, hold on, while everyone else is doing it, I know that that's not right. And so how important is it for parents to go beyond just monitoring and actually instilling those values and those beliefs and those morals of understanding the difference between right and wrong?
It's very important. These perpetrators are very good at what they do. And so even your child that you think knows, it's really important to continually talk to them and reiterate what it is that you're telling them. It's finding ways that they're not going to take offense to it. And I've always found that me saying it to them is not as good as a friend or a mentor telling them.
Yes. Well, and I think it's helpful. You have a lot of social media, speaking of being on the internet, there's a lot of social media campaigns and people that are making videos showing the dangers of it. And maybe just, I'm sure it probably gets across more to a child, hopefully, if they see it themselves, or they see a peer making a video, or they see a peer saying something. So maybe even as a parent, searching out those campaigns and those videos and sharing them with your child so that way they can see it from someone else's perspective.
Yes.
And I know that there's been recently a couple very big campaigns where they show young girls talking to people on social media, and they pretend to be a younger man or a teenager of their own age. And fortunately, it was approved by the parents, and it wasn't actually a perpetrator or predator. And the girls ended up meeting with these people, and they were shocked, and they cried, and they didn't understand. And it was very interesting to see that perspective, because a lot of times I think that children don't understand whenever a parent says stranger danger. It's very different whenever it's a person, and you don't let someone come up to you and touch you or talk to you in public, but it's very different whenever online you can pretend to be anyone you want to be. It doesn't have to be that person. So working with Streetlight, seeing girls that come in as victims, have you seen that story played out where girls from homes and from families have been deceived by people online and have ended up in a terrible situation?
Yes, we have. That's where it starts. A lot of it happens with people that we don't expect it would happen with, right? It's people that befriend our children. It's family members. It's unfortunate and it's hard to say, but it's grandparents, it's aunts, uncles, it's friends, girlfriends, it's women. It's no longer what we had imagined a perpetrator to be.
Just the creepy guy in the ice cream truck that's luring in the children. It's not like that anymore. It's not
anymore.
that clean cut. No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not stay away from them. It really could be anyone.
Yes.
And so that is very important for parents to be aware of. And thank you so much for joining us for this first segment here. And for all of you at home watching, this is something, if you have any child in your life, if you have any ability to touch or impact a child in your life, maybe their parents aren't as home, or they're not as present, and they're not doing this for them. So take this information, encourage them, encourage people that you know that are parents that maybe may not be doing this, and hopefully together we can help save a lot of lives and a lot of hurt and a lot of scars that are currently happening in our world. So please don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this short message.
I was feeling so alone.
I was going through a really difficult time.
I didn't want to bother anyone.
I didn't think they'd understand.
It was tough at first, but I did it.
I'm glad I asked for help.
I asked my teacher.
I asked my dad.
You can do this.
Whatever it is, ask for help.
If you're thinking about suicide or need support, call the Trevor Lifeline. Trained counselors are there to help 24/7.
Welcome back to Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Vanessa Rose. Thank you so much for staying with us. If you're just flipping by, please go ahead and stop. Right now, we are joined by Leah Benson, and she is the president and CEO of Streetlight USA, which is a great organization based here out of Arizona that is helping young women who are victims of sex trafficking, which is a terrible thing that is unfortunately happening around our world. And, as Christians, it's so important to realize that even though we are not of this world, we still are in this world, and there is still evil among us, and there are still things happening. And it's so important not to stay blinded to the issues that are happening around us. And even though it may make you uncomfortable, or it may be something you don't really want to talk about, it's so important to be aware of what's happening and to acknowledge what's happening. Keep it in your prayers, keep it in your thoughts, and whenever you can, reach out to someone who may be a victim of this, or spend time helping someone or encouraging someone that may be going through something troubling in their life. And so now we are going to be speaking about specifically child sex trafficking, which is, Leah, what you guys address specifically at Streetlight USA. So whenever we hear the term sex trafficking, I think it can be people probably get a lot of different images in their head. They get a lot of different thoughts. There's probably not one specific image that comes to mind. I think the best way I've ever heard it is it's really a form of modern day slavery, and it's happening to young adolescents and to children. So who specifically are victims mainly of sex trafficking?
Streetlight deals specifically with females, adolescent girls age 11 through 17. And, you know, we have had girls that we know of as young as 3 that have been trafficked. Trafficked by their aunts, trafficked by family members. And so who are they? They're nieces, they're daughters, they are someone's sister. It's just across the board. It is a female who the perpetrators and predators are looking for that have already been compromised.
Wow. And so you mentioned aunts, family members, relatives. Could you give me a specific scenario or kind of a timeline of how something like that would happen and how they would get into this environment from a family member?
Well, we have 2 girls that are with us. They came at different times, they're sisters. And their mom had transients in their home as a way to pay for their electric bill.
Oh,
right?
Lord.
So that is one of the ways. Another way is an uncle, a dad. We had a child that was there at an early age. Her dad decided to rape her, and then had 6 other friends come and rape her, and then decided to sell her. And so it's across the board. One of the main things that they talk about is the romantic predator, right? So what does the romantic predator do? Well, what girl doesn't like to be told, you know, that she would be a great friend, or that she's pretty, or that she's got a promising future, and that this person is there for them, right? It starts out as a child who may be fighting with mom and dad. And so what adolescent isn't in some point in their life vulnerable to that? And so you have someone who befriends them that says, hey, I saw you across the table, and you just look like you were really upset. Is there anything I can do? And then the next thing is this girl sobs, tells her story, even if it's just a little bit of, I just got in a fight, you know, with someone close. Well, that's fine. You know, I understand you don't want to tell me about it. I just want to be here for you, right? So it starts that way. And you know, here's my name, here's my number. If you need someone to talk to, please call me, because I really care, you know, about people. So what person wouldn't go to someone who is warm and welcoming when they're having issues? And so it starts as something very soft, and then it goes into the betrayal, the coercion, the I'm going to tell everybody that you're doing this in order that you've done this for me.
Wow. So it's not like a lot of times we see, and I know that there's that side of it that exists, where there's people that are kidnapped and taken and all of these things, but there's a very psychological, manipulative side of it, where there's a lot of kids then who become victims because of that.
Correct.
So how prevalent is the issue here in Arizona? How prevalent is it?
Studies are still about, this is not something that you can find out. Many of the girls that come to Streetlight have high profile, risk profiles, and they come in and it says that they weren't trafficked. Well, we did a little small study in the sampling, and of those girls, 2/3 of them were trafficked, and even the child didn't know they were trafficked. If you're brought up to where it's okay for someone to touch your body, do you know any different? It's really sad. I mean, our girls have gone places where they've been labeled as prostitutes. What child decided that this is really what they wanted to do?
Wow.
They didn't.
And I'm assuming that a big driving factor in this is fear. And a lot of these young women, you said 11 to 17? I mean, the thought that in our world there is so much evil that somebody would even want to touch or do anything with an 11-year-old is something that probably makes a lot of people extremely uncomfortable to even think about. But that evil exists. It is real. And it's something that we have to face as a community. And I think until people are willing to speak about it, to speak about the fact that it's happening, we probably will never know the true statistics of what's happening. So let me ask you, Leah, if there is, let's say, a young girl watching right now that happened to be flipping through and she is in a position where she is afraid, or she doesn't, she knows that something's wrong. If there is a young girl that feels guilty or doesn't know where to go, what are ways that young women can reach out for help and find help, and who can they go to?
They can actually call us. We do have counselors that, a counselor that is not specific to internal girls that are on premise, but we have 6 that are at home, that she is counseling not only the child, but the family as a whole. This is not, I mean, the child has gone through trauma, but you can imagine what's going on through the parents' mind of what's happened to their child. So they need counseling as well, and they need to be united. And so it's very important that if a child is at home, that if they need to reach out to someone and want counseling, they're free to call us, and we would be able to provide them with support.
And if a situation, maybe they're even afraid for their life or something, is that something where they can reach out to law enforcement? Is law enforcement trained? Do they understand? Do girls have to be afraid? Because I know in a little bit of research I've done about this is a lot of times there's a fear element put on these young women to where if you tell a police officer you can't trust them, you can't reach out to anyone, or I will do this to you, or as you said, I will tell everyone that you've done this. So if there's a girl watching that may be afraid for her safety, what is the best way to go about that? If she can't call and just say, you know, let's go for counseling, what is the best approach?
There is a family advocacy center,
Okay.
and those individuals are very well trained. They have counselors there, they have law enforcement there that they can reach out to. It's very safe. And so looking up the family advocacy centers is very important.
Okay.
And then through that, they can also ask to be connected to Streetlight for a longer term.
Okay, so it's something where there are resources, and I would just, as right before we move into the end, I do want to know specifically what Streetlights USA role is in the solution of this problem.
Our role in the solution is to provide a safe haven and resources for them to begin healing. You know, as dark as the issue is, this morning I had to write 4 testimonials, and we have one child that was with us for 11 months, and she had very little credit to graduate. She ended up graduating 10th in her class, and then received a scholarship, and she's registering to study law. And so it's great. One of the first girls that were placed at Streetlight, she is back east in cyber investigation and recently said, I would love to consider becoming a teacher. And so we have tons of success stories like that. So it's not so dark. These kids have dreams just like normal kids do. And they just need that helping hand again.
They're resilient. They come through and they can. Although I'm sure that's not without emotional and psychological scars, especially depending on how traumatic the situation was. Because I'm sure that you see all different levels of trauma and all different levels of scarring and wounds and women, young women that have been through situations. So if you wouldn't mind just taking a moment, I'd love for you to take a moment to look into the camera and maybe encourage a young woman, and maybe if she's going through something like this, and then after that, if we could just maybe say a prayer together for them and for all the young women who are going through this right now in their lives.
Great. So the encouragement that I want to give you is that you do matter, and that no matter what you've gone through, there is forgiveness, and that the shame that you may be feeling is a temporary shame, and that you can redirect and rewrite your own story again.
Yes, and would you mind saying a prayer then for some of these young women that may be watching, or for maybe their families or anyone that's experienced this in their life, just a prayer of encouragement and of faith, please?
Great. Lord, we ask that you be with those that may not understand that what they're living through is not the norm, and that when something doesn't feel right, when your gut says it doesn't feel right, it isn't right, and that they reach out for help. There are so many broken children out there that do need the help, that may feel hopeless. It isn't hopeless, and that through you, you make all things possible, and that all we need to do is to reach out for your hand. I ask that you be with these children, that you give them the strength and the courage to reach out, and to reach out and understand that there are people who care and want to see better for their lives. Amen.
Amen. Wow, well, thank you so much, Leah. Thank you so much for the work you're doing at Streetlight. If there's any questions, if you'd like to know more information, please make sure to visit the website that's been at the bottom of the screen. And more importantly, just a moment of encouragement. Remember that, first of all, God is not the person that allows things to happen. God gave us one thing very, very crucial in this life, and that is free will. And unfortunately, there is evil in this world. And so if there is someone that is hurting you or doing something, I think it's so important to remember that, first of all, it's not your fault. And second of all, God isn't doing this to you. It's humans make errors and humans make mistakes. And so there are people, organizations like Streetlight and other people who want to help you. And we just here at Joy in Our Town want to remind you that you are special and that you do matter, and that regardless of what is going on in your life, don't be afraid to speak up and don't be afraid to ask for help. And if you are in a situation where you're afraid or you need help, please make sure to reach out to someone. I'm sure that if you go to a school or something, that there's counselors and there are people that are trained, and it's always better to ask for help because there are people that do care. So thank you so much for watching. We always love joining you and spending time with you every week on Joy in Our Town. And if you'd like, we'd love to see you stop by our TBN Phoenix social media, our Facebook page, so that way we can keep the conversation going. Let us know what you think, and we look forward to seeing you here next time on Joy in Our Town.
This program has been sponsored by the Trinity Broadcasting Network, Post Office Box A, Santa Ana, California, 92711.